Chapter 8. As the dark-featured rider's gun lanced fire, Pat flung his body in a sideways leap and landed, staggering, upon the broader portion of the ledge. He lost balance, fell forward on hands and knees. Again the roar of his opponent's gun blared into his ears. Rolling sideways, he snatched at the butt that was protruding above his waistband. The lookout thumbed again, and two reports blended as one. Marveling that he had not been hit, the sheriff threw lead once, twice, 3 times as he sprawled out on the ledge. The dark-featured rider collapsed like a punctured balloon. His gun arm dropped. The iron slipped from his grip and clattered loudly upon the rocks. He swayed, crashed down upon the weapon. A tremor stirred his limbs, and then he lay still. Crouching, the sheriff moved closer, stirring the crumpled form with his boots, but the stranger was dead. "Guy couldn't hit a barn at 10 paces, muttered the sheriff in disgust. "Hombre who can't get on the mark quicker than that have no right to be toting guns." He stretched and stepped into the dark mouth of the cave. It was roomy. He had to stretch to touch the ceiling. Checking an implosion to explore its depths, he searched around. A disordered pile of blankets lay on one side. A stable lantern and a partly filled water bag were suspended from pegs driven into cracks that crisscrossed the rock. Beneath them lay an age-worn gun belt with an empty holster. A half-filled gunny sack was set beside it. The new leather of the dead man's gun belt caught the sheriff's eye when he stepped into the open sunlight. "I gamble that's probably Miss Ford's," he muttered. He turned over the slack body and unbuckled the belt and pulled it off. And then he picked up the gun and dropped it into the holster. Faintly, the shuffle of boots over shale reached his ears. Quickly, he plugged the empty out of his iron and slid in fresh loads. With no approach except the narrow ledge, he could hold the cave against an army. Crab-like, a squat figure eased around the bulge of the rock. The sheriff's taut features relaxed. It was Sam, a do-or-die expression upon his homely face. Behind him shuffled Ezra's big form, followed closely by Bill Williams. Sam gained the whole ledge, wiped the sweat off his damp brow. "Gosh almighty," he muttered. "Danged if I'll be going back that way." "How come you decided to monkey out here yourself?" demanded Pat. "Well, there wasn't no sight nor sound of you, so we hit the chimney. And then we heard fast shootings and figures you was in a jam. So we climbed out of that dog-blasted well, and there wasn't nothing but a ledge. A self-respecting wildcat wouldn't trust on himself." Sam mopped his brow upon recollection. "I ain't no mountain goat," he concluded feelingly. Ezra and Bill Williams joined the pair. Bill eyed the slack features of the dead lookout. "That's Ike Big Nose," he drawled. "A breed that strings along with Todd. He's fast with a gun. How in the hell did you get to him from that ledge?" "I didn't," confessed Pat. "He had me pinned down like a pigeon. He was snatching a little shut-eye, but come to life sudden before I reached the ledge. He flung 2 slugs at me before I could draw and missed both times." Bill eyed the ledge. "Hell, Ike couldn't miss at that range." "He thumbed a .38 right smart. Reckon that was Miss Ford's iron." Sudden understanding flooded into Bill's eyes. His wide mouth quirked. "Well, can you beat that? He was firing blanks." "Either you're loco or he was," snapped the sheriff. "That's the God's truth," grinned Bill. "Miss Ford loaded up on blanks, scared to kill someone. I could grab the gun down below and never check the loads." Well, thank God for Miss Ford's soft-heartedness, said Pat solemnly. He led them into the cave and indicated the lantern. You get it? The hairpin outside was posted at the needle to run off saddle stock and discourage visitors. With that lantern, he could stand way back in the cave and flash signals to another jasper on the wall. You couldn't see the light from below, and then them galoots get plenty of warning of whatever's brewing. He watched us post guards last night and laid off the ponies, but whoever's holding the Mirage mine has been wised up that we're around. Well, that means there's more than one in this deal, put in Sam. Seems we're up against a gang, returned Pat. And they hold the trump card. They got the Mirage and we can't locate it. He turned to Bill. You say this breed strung along with Todd? The rider, Bill, replied. Well, they was just like that. He held up his hand, 2 fingers twisted together. Where can we corral that there Todd? Well, he spends plenty of time over there in Dansville, lapping up liquor. Well, I reckon we're heading for Danville, declared the sheriff. With familiarity, the toughest trail loses its tremors, and so it was with the ledge around the bulging rock. One by one, the four shuffled back along, resolutely keeping their thoughts from the chasm below. Behind, they left the dead men for the buzzards to pick. That night they laid over at Coyote Springs. Midday found them jogging into the mining town. The sheriff dropped into the town marshal Morlin's office, where he and 3 companions made a beeline for the wagon wheel. A newspaper spread over his face, the bulky, bull-necked marshal was stretched out in his chair with massive legs resting on the desks, fingers locked over his chest and snoring rhythmically. Mischief in his gray eyes, Pat ignited a stinker match and applied it to the lower edge of the sheet. The flames crept up. Suddenly, with arms a-waving, the marshal erupted out of the chair like a tornado. Thoroughly awakened, he glared at the burning newspaper on the floorboards, and then became aware of a figure sitting in a straight-back chair chuckling silently. You sway-back maverick, he roared. Ain't you never gonna grow up? That's no way for the sheriff of the county to act. What's troubling you, Jim? Inquired Pat. That there's just a natural phenomenon, as they say in school. The sun rays must have set fire to your breath. That comes out drinking an explosive brand of liquor. Guess there ain't no more good stuff here in Danville. Morlin grumbled and stomped out the smoldering sheet. Pat's tone changed. Todd rake straw around town? The marshal again deposited his bulk into the chair. No, and he ain't likely to be. How come? The coyote's too dang handy with a gun. Took a snapshot at Bill Williams' back, so I gave him marching orders. Is he acquainted with Ike Big Nose, a breed? Sure. He ain't been around town lately neither, Morlin replied. Well, he won't be, promised Pat. I plugged him. Pity you didn't make it a pair, grunted Morlin. Todd won't be missed. Sam's black head thrust around the door jamb. Hey, Pat, rustle on over to the wagon wheel. The sheriff rose. Well, Jim, he advised gravely, don't be drinking no more of that explosive liquor. You're liable to burn up the town. Oh, you go to hell, advised the marshal. He watched the sheriff's tall figure cross the street, and the squat Sam talking volubly by his side. Pat Sorrell was tied to the rail outside the office. When the sheriff pushed through the bat wings and disappeared into the semi-obscurity of the saloon, Morlin heaved to his feet. He strolled out along the plank walk. With one hand he fondled the sorrel's velvety nose, and with the other he loosened the cinches. Then, shoulders squared and face stern, he thumped off along the plank walk. Flanked by Ezra and Bill at the bar, stood a small, withered rat of a man with pinched features, withered and wrinkled. Uncombed hair strangling from beneath his dilapidated Stetson hat, a tangled beard shot with white straying over his spoiled blue shirt. Ragged pants and stuffed into run-down boots completed his garb. His eyes deep sunk glared with unnatural light. Insistently he cackled and murmured. Wesper and Willie was one of those who challenged the solitudes and paid the price. In past years, he had roamed the desert and the barrens, seeking the ever-elusive strike. When his mind went awry, grub-stakers were wary. He became a hanger-on around saloons, tolerated out of pity for his affection. He still had a tumble-down cabin in an old ginny in a gulch south of town, and would disappear for days into the barrens. How he existed out there, the mountains only alone knew. "Willie claims he knows who bushwhacked Pete," boomed Ezra. Pat pushed in beside the desert rat. "Howdy, Willie. Make the rich strike yet?"
teetered the half-wit. "Lots of gold in the Crumbelas. Mountains of high-grade ore. No one can locate it except me, but I can't get me a grubstake."
"Well, you tell me something, and I'll grubstake you," promised the sheriff. "You remember Pete Ford?"
"Sure," giggled Willie. "Pete's crazy. Claims he found a mirage. There ain't no mirage. It's a mirage."
"You know who beefed Pete?" Willie nodded vaguely.
"I seed him by the spring with a partner. Shot him in the back. The spirits told me."
He peered up at the sheriff.
"In the mountains, they're full of spirits. They talk to me all at night. I hear 'em a whisper and they won't go away, and they won't leave me alone."
"Afore you come, he claimed he lamped the Jasper who shot Pete," boomed Ezra in disgust. "Now he claims it's spirits." "Give him a drink there, maybe a short drink," directed Pat. Willie gulped the old red-eye. "Now take her easy," said Sheriff. "Pete, he was your partner. You remember the night he was killed? You was near Coyote Springs, and you saw him smash down. Now, who did it?" The desert rat mumbled and fumbled with his beard, fidgeting uneasily. "Have you seen the Jasper around since?" demanded Pat. Willie nodded vigorously. "Well, you name 'em, and I'll give you a bottle, all for yourself." The sheriff lifted the bottle off the bar and held it out. Willie grabbed it with bony fingers. "Well?" The withered old scarecrow pushed away, mumbling and hugging the bottle against his chest. Pat grabbed him by the shoulder and swung him around. "No name, no liquor." Willie subsided into a sulky silence. Pat yanked the bottle out of Willie's hand and set it noisily upon the bar. "Shake up the rat," rumbled Ezra. "Maybe it'll help his thinking box." "Leave him be." Pat eyed the wizened figure with commiseration. Willie stared wildly around, slid between them, and shambled out of the saloon. "I'll have Jim Morlin keep an eye out on the cuss," said Pat. "Maybe he's got something, and he gets spells when he talks sensible." Pat strolled outside, angled across the street, and stood by his pony, eyeing it critically. He inserted his hands beneath the saddle blanket, feeling for burrs, noted the slackness of the clenches. With a faint smile, he tightened the clenches again, ducked under the rail, and headed into Morlin's office. Marshal eyed him guilelessly. "Keep an eye on Wesper and Willie, will you?" said the sheriff. "He says he's got a line on Pete's killer, but his brain's too fuddled to talk right now." Morlin nodded massively. Pat turned towards the door. "Just tightened my clinches. They seemed kind of slack." "Oh, yeah, they loosen up after a long pull," agreed the marshal with unmoved countenance. The sheriff rejoined his partners over at the wagon wheel. "When do we ride out of here?" demanded Bill. Pat scratched his chin. "Well, nothing we can do but head for the W bar. If Todd ain't around there, I reckon we drift into Dutch Springs." "Dang it. I'd stick around if I thought Willie would talk."
"Well, maybe he curled up Pete," suggested Sam.
"And set out a lookout on Needle Rock?" Pat shook his head. "We gotta get a hold of Todd." A shot rang out from the street. Through the saloon window, Pat saw Jim Morlin issue from his office, jammed into his black Stetson, and hurried off along the plank walk. The massive marshal was a stickler for law and order. Pat leaned against the bar, toying with his drink and weighing the pros and cons of future action in his mind. Sam and Ezra commenced into an argument, and Bill wandered across the floor and eyed up a poker game. The batwings swinged in violently, and Morlin pushed through, eyes searching. He sighted the sheriff at the bar and crunched across the sand floor. "Willie won't be talking no more. Some sidewinder plugged him." "Did you get the coyote?" "No. Willie was in a saloon chagging for drinks, and the Jasper got him through the side window." Pat thought rapidly. Someone in Danville was afraid the old prospector would talk. So afraid they took the risk of plugging him in broad daylight to seal his lips. And who was it? "You sure no one got a look for the killer's face?" flung out the marshal. Morlin shook his head somberly. "No one in the joint but a bartender and a couple smelter men. First thing they knew, a winder busted and Willie flopped over." Sam, Ezra, and Bill had gathered around observing the news. Pat turned to them quickly. "Scatter out and hunt for that Englishman. When you locate him, check on his movements. If he kicks, yank him into Jim's office." The three hit the batwings. Pat and the marshal slowly crossed the street. End of chapter 8.